isn't really an audience though. This is just you and me, fam.
I see it.
It's coming up. It should be coming up now. Okay, we're gold. We're live.
Your image is like so cool.
What image?
Like that says motivational speaker with like the cool lights or colors.
Oh, what's her name took that from me? Liz Retz.
Oh no, I have to. Okay.
I gotta mute too.
Muted
It's okay. It's not just you.
It's also going back and forth between us. Do you want it to do that, or should it be?
No, I want to fix that real quick.
I think if you pin both of us, or just do gallery view.
I think I got it. I'm getting there. Stop yelling.
Sorry, I don't know.
No, you're right. You're exactly right. It should be in gallery view now. So.
Oh yeah, it is.
So
wow, look at us.
Look at us. Is it on YouTube right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me grab that YouTube link.
This is freaking cool.
Streaming live now.
Eric.
Oh
he
yeah.
quoted me.
Cool. Oh yeah.
Paul Rudd. I love Paul Rudd. Why did he say that though?
Where? Who said Paul Rudd? Where?
Eric.
Where did he say Paul Rudd?
In the YouTube chat.
Oh, okay. I'm not okay. Well, my chat hasn't. Oh wait, look at us. Oh yeah, I see it now. I'm drunk.
But did we say something about Paul Rudd?
No, that's a quote from Paul Rudd. That's a Paul Rudd quote. Jesus.
Oh, I thought he was quoting me.
No, he's quoting Paul Rudd from like a Hot Ones interview. It's like an internet meme. It's like, look at us.
Oh.
You and me.
Shoot.
Get one dude in the chat and it's already crazy.
I know. All right. Hopefully my microphone just
here's the YouTube link. Here is the YouTube link. All right, y'all. And here.
I love Paul Rudd. I'm glad that I accidentally quoted him.
That's amazing. I literally need to go to my page though, because I just realized that I'm gonna have two chats running now because I said Twitch, but I need Twitch and YouTube.
Oh, I see Twitch.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go to the Twitch chat as well, so I get both of them at the same time. Look at me stacking windows. You know what? Like, I really like Sadhguru, and he is like he's like the epitome of a dude who's like on the internet, and like he's like an old dude who like knows what's up. Like, he'll be like, oh, you know, man, I'm getting trolled on Twitter, and I'm like, what? How do you know what a troll is, man? Like, it just keeps me very aware to never be that person. Like, I don't get technology. I ain't old. I ain't stupid. I'm like, this guy, like, you know, he has no reason to know any of this shit. Like, I'm sure you could hire somebody to like handle a lot of that. You know what I mean? Am I making any new movies? I'm gonna be making a movie later this year. I'm very excited about it. But not right now. Head over to YouTube. We are about to tape the podcast and jump in the chat. It's a Spiritual Friends podcast, and we're going to be talking about our awakening journeys. Me and Sarah and I. What up, Queen? Her name is Queen. It's not just colloquially calling her Queen. I mean,
where are you seeing all these people?
On my TikTok. My TikTok is off screen right here.
Okay.
Let me minimize our chat. I'm just gonna. I don't really need the Zoom. And I guess should I record the Zoom if YouTube's recording? Right? I don't know. I'm drunk. I don't know.
That's a good question. Well, because we can download it from YouTube, right?
Yeah. Let me.
But I could record on Zoom if you want me to do it.
Oh, could you? That'd be great.
You might have to give me permission, but let me try. Okay, yeah, you need to give me permission.
Participants, Sarah Samuel Moore, make host. No, I don't want to change the host.
I think you can just be allowed to record.
Record, yeah, that's a button.
All right, cool. I'm recording.
Sexy. I am not actually drunk. Oh my gosh. I don't. Yo, I did a live drunk one time. It was the worst I did ever. Not drunk. Like I had like a glass of wine, which essentially makes me drunk these days. It was the worst idea I've ever done in my life. I was like,
that sounds fun. Wait, where did it go wrong?
well, no, it didn't go wrong, but it's just like people are always asking me like, very serious questions. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, fuck them. It's not the move. We're doing a podcast right now, recording it with my friend Sarah, and it's 6:31. So we're going live on my YouTube. Head over to my YouTube, and the link is in my bio on TikTok. There's also a link on the Discord. Yeah, just come over to the chat. We're going to be talking about spiritual awakening process. We're about to get started. I'm going to flip y'all and see if we can just get y'all going over there so you can kind of see if you want to. But that's what's about to go down. I don't want to end the chat console.
You're juggling a lot right now. I just want to say good job. Like, you're doing a really good job.
Oh my God, thank you. Like, I appreciate that positive fucking reinforcement. That's great for me. All right, got that. I'm gonna minimize the chat so that you guys have a better viewing experience. You're just gonna be seeing my whatever. Y'all are here. Okay. We got 3 people on.
Brianna's here.
There, and then we got some more people here. I have
a lot.
Wastedly still drunk apparently. I lost my YouTube window. There it is. All right, let's get it.
Cool.
All right, so one more thing. Apologies before we go.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is so awesome.
Thank you for rolling with us today. I'm glad y'all are finally getting to meet Sarah, the GOAT.
What does that mean, the GOAT?
Greatest of all time.
Because I'm a Capricorn?
I forgot we're both Capricorns. I forget that sometimes.
I know. I feel like we're like the least Capricorn-y Capricorns ever also.
I'm literally like, I'm just barely a Capricorn. Barely.
I feel like my Capricorn, and I have like 5 planets in Capricorn too. Like I have a lot of Capricorn in my chart.
You? That's crazy.
And I feel like it is what tethers me to reality.
Facts.
Otherwise, I'm like, I don't know.
I feel that. All right. I'm just going to give up. Okay. I'm just going to stay with this chat.
Semi Aquarius. Nice. My dad's an Aquarius. There's a lot of planets in Aquarius right now, so you might be feeling that.
All right.
I don't know anything about astrology.
Ready when you are. Let's get it.
I'm just responding to the chat because I'm like so happy to have people talking to me.
I appreciate you for doing that, dude. All right. Let's get started. Welcome to the Spiritual Friendz podcast. Me, David. Might know me from TikTok as motivational speaker. This is one of my really amazing humans that I know, Sarah. I don't want to put your whole government name out there in case that's not something you want to divulge to people. My
government name. It is on my both of our government names are on our Zoom. We might want to change that.
Oh yeah. Let's get rid of that. Oh, rename. Motivational. Done. Cool. Yeah. So we just get started. So Sarah and I, do you want to like talk about like why we're doing it or what's happening? Do you want me to
should we say like welcome to our podcast? You did a good jingle. Do you remember what it was?
David, well, I can't do it again.
Okay.
Sarah, Spiritual Friendz. Some shit like that. Let's just.
I love it. Put a beat on it.
No, don't do that. Let's not do that. So Sarah and I, we go back. We should do our history, like a little bit.
Yeah.
For folks, we met at Westside Comedy Theater here in Los Angeles, specifically Santa Monica on the West Side. And she was on some teams. I was on some teams, and that's kind of how we met, right? Like there's more things.
Yeah, we have mutual friends, and yeah, I have trouble remembering like our exact. I know we just went over it on another podcast, but I have trouble remembering like the exact moments of meeting.
Yeah, me too. But it kind of all runs together. When you frequent a comedy theater, the days and nights tend to run together. So I totally get that. But essentially we kind of connected on sort of a spiritual kind of way, probably at one of our very insane parties that we tend to have. And I don't know. I mean, that's kind of where I was like really, really intrigued and really excited to talk to Sarah about any of this. But the reason we ended up wanting to do this podcast was because we always get together and have really fun and interesting conversations. And for me personally, I think my idea was I really want to make spirituality very kind of basic and very approachable. And I think we both have different approaches, but relatively grounded with all the Capricorn energy. And I think it's really fun and useful. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be practical. Like, I feel like there's in some communities and stuff, it feels split, or it can get split from like regular life, you know, like being spiritual versus like being a human being, and they should be merged. Or they can be merged if you want to merge them. You don't have to, I guess. Everyone can just do whatever they want.
Just you're already being way too pragmatic for this shit.
I'm not here to tell anyone what to do.
Tonight, we really wanted to get into sort of the awakening process and our specific like awakening stories. And, you know, maybe you have something that, you know, something resonates with you. So Sarah's essentially going to talk about her thing. I'm going to talk about my thing. We may ask some questions during Sarah's questions will be better than mine because that's what she does. And after that, we'll take some questions and comments and stuff from the chat section, and that'll be our night. David and Sarah, spiritual friends. That's it. That's
Woo!
it. Take that to the. I can do it when I'm not being queued up.
I love it.
So Sarah, could you talk to the folks about your journey? Because I don't know. I know I kind of have like an idea, but it's kind of flowy. So I'd love to hear kind of maybe in detail your experience.
Yeah, I was thinking about it today and I was like, where does it start? And I think it really starts just sort of my whole life. I grew up Jewish, or I am culturally and ethnically Jewish. But I never was really into religion, and it never really made a lot of sense to me. So I actually like never even had a bat mitzvah or anything, and kind of rejected the whole idea of organized religion. And then as a teenager, I was like very into being atheist. I don't know if you knew that about me. I feel like, yeah, I couldn't convince myself to actually be atheist, because I really thought like you can't disprove that there's a God just logically with my own human logic. Yeah. So I was always agnostic, but kind of like reaching for atheism. And I was just very like analytical, very mental, couldn't understand. Like I grew up, there were like a lot of Christians in where I grew up, and I would just get in arguments with them, and I just thought religion was so silly, and how could anyone believe in that? And then I went to college, and I got like pretty into Judaism just because I had a crush on my RA who was Jewish, and a few of my RAs were Jewish. I went to school at NYU, so I think there's like a big Jewish population there. And I took this class, and this is like the long story. I took this class that they pay you. What?
I said, I'm with it. I'm sorry. I had to close my door.
Oh, no worries. They would pay you $500 to take this like Jewish class. So I took it, and it was like very like learning about like Orthodox Judaism. And I got kind of into that for a little while and went to Israel. And then somewhere in there, I don't know what prompted it, but I had like my freshman year of college, I just had this calling somewhere inside of me where I was just like, I want to find my soul. Like that's the phrasing that I used. I don't remember where it came from or why I suddenly had that intention or inclination, but I think of that as sort of the beginning. And from there, I stopped wearing makeup and I stopped straightening my hair. And that was sort of like the steps that I thought to take for like finding my soul. I think I just had like an innate understanding that I was doing those things to get, you know, external validation or to be perceived in a certain way. And so that was kind of like my reasoning, or like what I thought the first steps should be. And then I feel like over time, I think really one of the first things was doing mushrooms when I was maybe a sophomore, I think, in college.
To everybody listening and in the chat, these are not necessary. This is just, you know, Sarah's experience. I feel so strongly about this. Yeah, it's cool.
I agree. And we can talk about that.
We will.
So yeah, I got pretty into doing mushrooms. And actually the first time that I did them, I had this experience where I just, everything, my whole perception of everything was different than it was before I had taken them, while I was on them. And that was profound to me, because I think before that, I just thought my perception of reality is reality. Like I didn't understand, or even it never would have crossed my mind to think that the way that I was perceiving reality was exactly that, just perception and not the real thing. So I think seeing that for the first time was really, really profound. And the next day I woke up and I was like so depressed because I couldn't be in this other reality that I had witnessed, where I was like so in the present and I like was not judgmental and I just was taking things as they come. And so like, you know, in the present moment. And I was like, oh, that's what people mean when they say that. But over time of like doing more mushrooms and talking about these things with friends who are also kind of having spiritual awakenings at the same time, you know, my consciousness sort of expanded. And I think one of the huge things that happened, actually, this is getting like pretty deep into it, actually, this isn't something that I share a lot, but when I was a senior I've always like been prone to depression and kind of suicidal thoughts. And when I was a senior in college, I drunkenly tried to kill myself. And I ended up in like a psych hospital for about a week. And that again was like extremely profound, because I really was grappling with this idea of death and the way that our society deals with death and deals with depression and deals with like feeling bad. And I really saw how our, you know, healthcare system doesn't treat mental illness in a way that is supportive of health, and that it's all about liability and fixing the problem and giving meds, which just was not my path. If other people take, you know, antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, that's up to everyone to decide for themselves. But I really saw like, I didn't feel cared about. Like when I was in there, I didn't feel like my mental well-being was like really cared about. And I saw the fear in, you know, the doctors and how everything was just done out of fear, or at least that's how I was perceiving it. Fear of feeling bad, fear of death. And so I really was kind of grappling with that. And then, yeah, so that was like very profound. And then I remember like writing a paper that was like very philosophical in my senior year. And I kind of was going back and forth between this like feeling of like experiencing the oneness and the sort of breaking down of like boundaries and what I felt like were arbitrary borders between objects and people and things. And so I'd kind of go into that space and then have to kind of come back and like solidify to like write it down or whatever. So I was really kind of like going back and forth between like the oneness and the individuation. And I think that just doing that for the paper was like in some ways like good practice. And then I sort of was able to maintain this kind of like sense of oneness more often.
Can I ask you just real quick? Yeah. So Sam is really big on this sort of, she's great at like giving me like little nuggets like to wrap up what I'm thinking sometimes. And a question she always, or something she always reminds me of, because I get this question a lot, like, tell me about your spiritual process, is when did you become aware of that you were like having a spiritual awakening, or that you were on a spiritual journey? Like, when did you become aware of that switch?
That's an interesting question. In some ways it felt so natural. It felt like I was just in a natural evolution from that point of, going, I want to find my soul, to having this, and I didn't necessarily connect those things. I wasn't like, wow, I feel like I found my soul just like I asked for, or whatever. So I don't know. I will say, so after college, I went to the University of Santa Monica to study spiritual psychology. And I think that is sort of where the intellectualization of it solidified for me in a way that was not necessarily positive. I mean, I think I've like learned a lot from it, but it kind of made me overthink it. And I started to get really into like the ideas and conceptualization of spirituality, rather than before. I was just having this change in my perception and change in my experience. And then now I was doing it in a more academic way. So I was overthinking it more. And I was around people who were like really into tarot and really into astrology and really into energy healing and Reiki and like all of these different modalities that I hadn't really come across before. Not that I hadn't come across them at all, because my parents are in this spiritual community. And so they, I was exposed to it, but it wasn't really when I was in college and going through the spiritual awakening. No one was doing tarot. We were just talking about it and reading Alan Watts and doing that kind of stuff. But we weren't like energy healing and like, whoa, astral travel and like all these, terms and modalities that we hear of in LA. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for how it is in other places, but in LA, there's like, such a huge community of people who are like into all this different kind of stuff. And so that's when I really, like, in some ways, I think that really took me off track, because I just was, spinning and overthinking like all of these different things. But I think being exposed to that is also interesting. And I definitely went through a lot of years of like trying everything and trying to find the thing and, really seeking to kind of come out the other side like, okay, actually, like, I don't need any of that stuff, including the mushrooms, right? I mean, I was really into mushrooms when I was in college, and I was like drawing them all the time. And then when I got to LA, I was like, everyone's going to think I'm so weird because I'm like drawing mushrooms all the time and I can't stop. I have pages and pages of just drawing mushrooms because I was like, I need to get it out. I need to get it out of my system.
Need to see this drawing. So you still have them? Please tell me you still have them. Like,
the pictures, I think I do. At least some of them.
I'm in. Please share.
I know, now I'm like, that's cool. I should have embraced it. But I was in a community that like was not into like drugs and alcohol and like all of these things that I felt, for me, kind of assisted my spiritual awakening, I would say. And we can, I don't know if you want to talk about mushrooms now or after you go into your thing. But
I'll go and then we'll get to the mushrooms, because I really do want to talk about sort of the, I can see there's also going to have to be a segment where we get into the kind of minutia.
We have to like suss it out. Yeah. Okay. So do you want to go and do your overview?
Sure. Man, I feel like I've done this a lot recently, so I'm trying to like not play the hits and be a little more forthcoming.
Totally.
But yeah, for me, I think I had a really, well, I guess there's two sort of versions of this, right? There's the retrospective, where I can look back now, very much now, and see that the sort of spiritual dimension of my life that it's taken thus far has always been. Like, I can very much look back at like 5-year-old me having conversations with my mom about like religion and church constantly. But I will say, the big swing, I guess, pushing in the direction had to come very basic. I think uh, unfortunately for a lot of people, or maybe fortunately, it's not neither there here nor there, but it was just me being obviously obsessed with my job, right? Seeking that validation. And I'm an actor in LA. And so for me, I was out here and I'd always been kind of, not very present, just kind of floating, and really had attached to this idea that, man, once I finally can just be acting, when that's all I'm doing, I'll be happy. It'll be it. When that's like my only job, I don't have to have these shitty day jobs. And I was like, then I will be on Easy Street. And I don't even know if I consciously thought that. Like, I don't even know if it was like something like I was conscious of, which I think can be really challenging for people, because when the rug gets pulled out from under you, like when you do finally get it, which I did, right? I had the opportunity to kind of act full time, which I definitely shouldn't have been. But it was there. And I was like, it's like you got it. And then there's that like emptiness. And I think I know a lot of people who are listening and seeing this can resonate with that, like kind of, but I got it. Like, we're here. And it's good for like a day. Like for a couple days, you're like, this is fucking tight. I'm doing whatever I want. Yeah. Just auditioning. And then like, that I was carrying the sort of pressure of that into like auditions. And then, so I'm not working as much, but I'm still sort of making money because of the nature of the business and residuals and things. So I'm still kind of hustling and doing all that. But it's not working out. I'm not working. And so when you've placed your entire like validation on something external like that, and you're not getting it, it's like, well, now I'm a terrible person, right? Like now I suck. And that led me into sort of a dark space, this sort of depression space that I was completely unaware of. And I live with my partner, and she has a 9-to-5, like a proper 9-to-5. So there's nothing, I can be home by myself and get it together just long enough to, show up for her. And so I was just probably at my lowest point. And like really just, let's normalize talking about suicide.
Right?
I feel like let's just normalize, because it's a real thing, man. Like, and you really, and now, yeah, sure, I can say I have the perspective of, I wanted whatever that version of me was to die. Like that egoic cage that I had locked myself in needed to die, not literally, but I needed to place my attention on a state of being that was more resonant with, my ideals. But and I was kind of done with it, like in a really real way. On probably maybe the worst, weirdest, lowest day, I had a friend of mine like hit me up. He was like, yo, let's go to lunch. I'm like, what? Why? I was like, nah, man. And when you're like, those depressive states where you like just lie, you're just like, I can't deal with people. So yeah, man, no, man, I got an audition, can't make it. And he's like, all right, calls me back, let's go to dinner. I'm like, fuck, bro, like, man, I'm really busy. He's like, nah, just come to dinner. I was like, all right. And I don't think, like, I've never called him and told him this, but it was like really maybe the most pivotal moment of my life. Like he literally he was like asking me about some like acting questions or something, and then he could see that I was like not there. So he literally spent the whole dinner just encouraging me and telling me, he thinks I'm a leader and I need to lead and I need to do all these things and just being whatever. And when you're in, I'm not a hope guy. I'm not a fan of the construct of hope, as far as making it like a way of life. But I do think, in a really cool book by David R. Hawkins, Letting Go. He has a bunch of books, but he talks about how, when you're sort of in these sort of lower states, any kind of leg up is a W. Like anger can get you out of apathy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So hope he just gave me just enough hope for me to go, all right, well maybe. And so I guess kind of a fast forward, I took an acting class online with this new sense of, I'm like, I'm going to take control of my career. The acting class ended up being this woman. I'm just going to name drop her here because she's saved my life also. Amy Jo Berman. She's the most internet acting coach ever. She's like, I found her on Facebook. that's how sad I was. I was on Facebook, y'all. And so I took her class, and her whole deal was about energy and dealing with and being a better person. And how are you showing up in rooms? I wasn't aware that I was showing up in audition rooms needy and seeking that validation from them. And then that's reason why I wasn't getting jobs. And I wasn't showing up as a whole person. So you can't embody a character if you're not showing up as a whole person. So her whole course was focused on showing up as you, showing up the best version of you. That led to some sort of meditations, and just religiously, I created an entire schedule around this course, and it was the whole thing. And I was feeling great. And then one day I was feeling really I really let go a lot of resistances in my life. And I was in Texas. I remember I was in Texas with Sam's family for some reason. And I sent a message to some friends of mine. And because I just was like, man, this feels like I had this really great epiphany. And I was like, I just want to encourage some people. So I did that. And I remember my friend Jake texted me back. You know, Jake, he hit me and he was like, yo, something's happening right now in LA and it feels like my brain's exploding. I can't really describe it. And I'm like, what do you mean? I don't know what you mean. It was very confusing. I was like, I was like, yeah. And I thought we were talking about the same thing. I was like, no, I feel you. Yeah. And he's like, but I don't know. You just come see me when you get back. So I came back when we got back, and I just went to I remember going to his apartment, and literally, he showed me this weird fucking YouTube video. And mind you, I'm not a David Icke guy, but it was his old David Icke interview. He's in purple tracksuit. And for those of you who don't know, he's a conspiracy guy. Don't look him up on YouTube. Please don't. Just don't. Just don't. I mean, I want to be it wasn't. But for whatever reason, for me, that I just remember sitting down, watching the video, and when I stood up, I looked at Jake, and it was the entire universe just went boom, and the whole thing, I could just feel my consciousness expanding in real time, just going boom, 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 boom. And the best way I used to describe it, it was somebody put a cog in a machine that I had been building that I didn't know I was building, and they just put it in there and it just turned on immediately. And I was just like, oh, what the fuck is going on? What the fuck? And yeah, for those y'all, I know y'all know this. So it's but it's such a strange thing to experience real time, because it's nothing you've ever experienced. And I hadn't taken psychedelics. I'd never, done any of that. So for 2+ years, I'm just I have no clue. I have no concept for a spiritual awakening. I had no idea what the fuck that was. So for 2 years, I'm just riding a wave, man. It was just just do things that new things that I didn't know, experiencing the entirety of my life at one point, being able to fully dive into memories and experience all the senses within those memories. I mean, just some weird shit. And so much of my experience, though, was relatively quickly, I realized that because the journey was so self-helpy, relatively quickly, I realized it had to be about my real life. It had to be about, how do I make this useful? Because I remember I was reading a book, a spiritual book. I didn't know it was a spiritual book, but I was reading a book that I found. And I was like, but how the fuck is this useful? And when I asked the question, the answers just started coming. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the move. So it wasn't until I was going on a trip to Mexico for a thing that somebody was like, blah, 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 spiritual awakening in the back of the bus. And I was like, wait, I think that's what's happening to me.
Wow.
And that's when it was 2.5 years before I even heard the term spiritual awakening. So I had no concept for tarot, chakras, any of that shit. I was just like, well, whatever. And so that's essentially my experience. And so that shaped my experience. Yeah, that was a crazy, it was crazy. And I'm very grateful that I didn't know anything about spirituality to this day, because it really made it about my life and, working on my relationship with Sam and showing up full and complete from friends and family and things like that. Instead of about kind of stuff. But yeah, that was my thing, or at least, some of it.
You brought up there's so much in what you shared in your story. I feel like every like new thing I was like, yes, we need to talk about that. Yes, we need to talk about that. I mean, I think this idea, like sort of where you ended is sort of where I ended up, of the conceptualization of these like spiritual things, and how I feel like that can really get in the way a lot. Like I'm grateful also, like, even though I had concept of spiritual awakening from like my parents, it wasn't something that I cared about. So when I was going through mine for those first 3 years or whatever, it also was like just so personal to me, and just a process of exploration, which it sounds like it was for you as well.
Yeah,
and I'm grateful not to have had that conceptualization to cloud my experience, because we can so attach to those things of being like, I don't know, it's just the mind can just get in the way when we're like, oh, tarot is the thing, or like, oh, mushrooms are the thing, or like whatever the thing is that we heard of. And then we do it in our mind instead of like with our being,
100%. I definitely,
yeah.
It's funny. I'm aware that I think I lean a bit more. I'm already not a very highly conceptual person. I'm very general. I'm very kind of loosey, whatever. So my journey was also very much a lot of the time, like I understood like how these concepts are just kind of pointing to something else intrinsically. I think I would have trouble. I think personally, I think connecting to myself after I became enamored with the concepts, I think it was more of a personal sort of confusion at one point, I would say, of like thinking like, well, I guess because my experience was so intense. I mean, okay, let's talk about that. I really wanted to get into that actually, because I mean, if you are experiencing spiritual awakening, there is this stage, that opening bell, like the bliss stage of your awakening, where things are just coming up aces. And I feel like, was this for you? Like, I think there's a temptation to want to stay there and like I used to stress out so much about trying to get back to like where I was that time a long time ago. Did you have that experience at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think since drugs were like a huge part of mine, and, so my friends and I were like drinking a lot. We were doing mushrooms. We were doing Molly. I hope like the government doesn't like come after me. And so I think for us, at that time, it really was, we were also like going to music festivals. So we were like experiencing these sort of like really high highs. And I saw it with myself and with all of my friends, of that kind of like trying to get back to that thing. And like, let's, maybe if we take more mushrooms, that's the thing. Maybe if we take more Molly, that's the thing. Maybe if we drink more, that's the thing. Or like maybe try cocaine, or like maybe another music festival will be the thing. And kind of reaching for all these like external things that we maybe for a time felt like that's where our experience was coming from. Which I guess is like a common, probably a common thing with like drugs and alcohol, especially. But I imagine even just with meditating and I had like I had one moment in my spiritual psychology program where I literally felt like I was like tripping from just a process that I did. And then, and then it was like the same thing of like, oh, maybe if I do the process with that same guy again, I'll have that same experience of like feeling like, and trying to get that. And it's, I mean, that's a trap that can keep you for a long time. I feel lucky that I wasn't kept there for a significantly long time.
Yeah, I definitely, it can be, it's a bit of an ego cage that I think that folks can get sucked into. I talk about this on TikTok sometimes, but I know that it's like your mind, it's a very natural thing, right? Don't beat yourself over the head of it. Like, when you think about your awakening process, your mind is expanded kind of in this limitless direction and it wants to solidify. I saw this Sadhguru interview recently where he's talking about it's like blowing bubbles. We are the bubble, like we're blowing these bubbles of our life, right? And I'm butchering this, I'm sorry, Sadhguru. But he's like, you're blowing these bubbles, but it's like you're the bubble and the air, right? But you need the separation of the bubble, or you don't know what anything is, right? If we're all just air, it's confusing as shit. So you do need a certain level of conceptualization to function. And I think that's where, when we look at something like spirituality, I think it becomes very crucial, useful to that it's not something that's really, when you relegate it to this idea of like the spiritual and the material in this separate space, you're really just playing in the same space that, religions have played in for an extended period of time, and pulling that same idea around. I had another question to ask you about how was your relationship and your awakening talking to people? Like, as far as being able to talk out, because I know you said you did the LA thing, and I feel like there's a community here, but how did you navigate that? Because I have a version of that, and I just want to hear.
Yeah. So at the beginning, when I was in that process, that was very organic for me. I was luckily with friends who were going through something similar. And so we had each other to talk to, and we were sort of in this, group together alone. And I would just kind of talk about what I was experiencing freely. And then when I started my spiritual psychology program, I started noticing that if I was to talk about these things with other friends, friends from college and stuff, I was like sort of alienating them or alienating myself. I was not finding connection. I was disconnecting really from people. And I think that's partly just because I was talking in a very conceptual way that they could tell wasn't truth, like, for example, I had a friend in college who was really into the more conceptual parts, and he was really into crystals. That was like his main thing that he was into at the time. And he alienated everybody because he just was like, take this crystal means this thing. And everyone was just like, we don't care about your crystals. Like, we're experiencing life. We're having a fight, and that's fine. Like, we don't need a crystal to like de-escalate the situation or whatever. Like, he was like hiding crystals like under his roommate's pillows, and like it was out of hand.
I just had the most random thought about who we should have on this podcast. If I forget, please remind me, because I'm just like, okay. It's a great idea. I'm not going to say it now, but please keep going. Sorry.
You can write it in the chat to keep for later, like in our Zoom chat.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can see that. And so I think that was part of the disconnect, because I was going from concept rather than truth from like my heart. That would be, good. And then, and that's kind of what I experienced like in my LA spiritual community too. It's like everyone was just using these words like God and angels and like Christ energy and like all these things that like, I don't really know what they meant,
Yeah.
I could translate them to be like, okay, I think you're talking about this other thing that I've had this experience with, but it wasn't like language that I would use. And so I feel like there was like a huge disconnect for a really long time. And I feel like I even feel that now. Like, I don't feel like I really talk about spiritual stuff that much with people normally.
Yeah.
I talk about it like with you, because like we can connect on it. And then, every once in a while, like I have, some friends and stuff that we can talk about, and I don't know if that's so. Yeah, I know that you experience it so differently because you're so like free and open and able to talk about it. And I don't know like what it is exactly about like my own experience with it that's sort of, I think in some ways like it probably is just the over conceptualization of it. And it's like when you're not speaking from your truth, it's like very disconnecting, and people can feel that.
I think that's what, that's kind of the nature of my disconnect was mine was such I saw it everywhere. Like it wasn't this concept out there like spirituality. It was literally like, it's this bus sign, it's that tree, like the whole, literally the conversation we were having. It's I think my experience was so experientially fractal and visceral that it created a challenge for me not to just, because it was so, it seemed very much the issues that I'd see with people, things that people like talk about, whatever, the ideas for me, I was like, it's very simply this thing. And to this day, I'm very kind of open about the simplistic nature of, I will oversimplify because I think it's really useful in the world where we're obsessed with concepts to just be like, it's really just kind of this one problem that we're all dealing with. At the time though, like earlier a while ago, one of the biggest challenges I ran into was like, kind of like you said, being able to communicate with people, but also it just pouring out of me. Like it was just this steady stream. It was my always experience. Everything became that. I think Natasha could probably tell stories like just from being like an improv class, and it was just like just literally my entire experience was that. And something that I was not aware of was just how massive the sort of spiritual community in Los Angeles was, and how a lot of those concepts were so like kind of tossed about. And so I usually experience a couple of things, or a few things. One was just outright dismissiveness, people being like, oh, you're one of those spiritual people, which I had no clue. I had no clue that was even a thing that people did. Another was I'd find anybody who was like, kind of like, I'm like, oh, you're spiritual? Okay, let's have a conversation. And then I would, like a puppy, I'm like, oh my gosh. And so, and I can't even describe it, but I would very quickly see that it wasn't their experience. I came from church, Christian church, grew up Southern Christian, Southern Baptist grandpa. And pattern recognition is something that I think is just kind of inherent to me. I'm very sort of visual and pattern recognizing. So growing up, I could always tell when somebody would be like, well, I remember every single sermon that was identical to every other sermon, and how every Christian would all say the same things to me to explain their Christianity. What is this? Oh, well, like what's sin? Oh, it's missing the mark. What's Jesus? Oh, well, he's perfect. And I'm like, and none of it ever meant anything to me. And it would infuriate me because I could never get a straight answer, and it didn't hold up to logic. And so when I started with the spiritual stuff, I was slowly watching that happen again in real time when I find somebody to have a conversation and be like, wait, what? And that would create a disconnect because, and this is kind of where the nuance of everything that I'm ended up kind of doing now came from, but I would just want to be like, well, no. And I had no concept of letting people like have their own journey and shit. I was just like, what? No, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, nah, like, and I don't think I would be like, I wasn't that aggressive because I'm pretty non-confrontational for the most part. But I was just like, but like, no, it would be such a challenge for me. So a lot of what I'm doing, like on TikTok, Instagram, I think it was Instagram, was just creating that space so I could just be like, this is just the way I see it, take it or leave it. And so much of it was just a valve. Like people were like, oh, like, why did you want to help people? I'm like, it's just what happened because it was a valve release. It was like me just being able to say, yo, this is just the way I see it, take it. And then I can go into my life and be like, and we can have like a human conversation, because it's, I mean, to this very moment, it's always everything, my entire experience kind of is that. So I'm always looking for ways to ground that and bring that into real life. But I do very much, a lot of what I do is really just to get it out of me and like put it somewhere, because it was just going to come regardless. And I was tired. It was not useful for me to impress that on people. You know.
Yeah. And I mean, so much is people hear what they want to hear. I mean, that's the thing about it, is like, you can't, it's not teachable. I mean, you can't
No.
express it through concepts or language. It's really something that every person has to experience themselves. And that doesn't mean that talking about it's not useful. I think it like really is. And there are even some points in your story that you were kind of describing things. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of, you're describing something that I experienced. And maybe like I wouldn't have known how to put words to that or something. So I think finding recognition in each other's stories is really helpful. But I mean, yeah, I mean, you can listen to like spiritual teachers or, you know, lecture or read a book or something and do it again a year later, the same thing, and hear something different, or hear, you know, it can be slightly tweaked, or you can see something you totally missed before. And so I think it really just, I mean, it like blows my mind a little bit. Like, how does anyone even like communicate with each other?
That points to kind of like a lot of what the old mystery schools used to do, which was this concept of we're not talking about it. Granted, yeah, there was also the risk of persecution from, you know, people and shit.
That little thing.
Small thing, some genocide, some wars, whatever. But I think a lot of it also has to do with it's like it's kind of about being for me. And I woke up one day and noticed that so many of the people in my life that I value, a lot of their focus is very much on just being human. And so now the people who like I'm obsessed with are like, I'm not like gurus and stuff are lit, like I love them, but like I love seeing like real life yogis, especially ones who have no concept of spirituality. Like I follow so many on TikTok that I'm just like, yes. There's this oh man, I can't even, she's this hula hoop chick on TikTok, and I'm not gonna drop her name, hoop something. But I'm just like, she's a straight up yogi. Like her whole beingness is about that. And I'm sure she has some spiritual aspects to her or whatever, but like I think, yeah, playing in the spiritual space is fun, but like be a good person. Like it's I talk about this on I gotta stop saying that. It's obvious that I talk about this on my page, but I do talk about this a lot. I think it's easy to be spiritual when I'm at home meditating with crystals in my hand and incense going. Like, what are you like when, like, you know, Alan from accounting comes down and asks for a billing report for the 57th time, and you're just like, shut the fuck up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you're on the 405, like what's your practice when that's happening? And that is really kind of, I think, you know, the best sign to point to, like how much pleasantness am I experiencing on a daily basis?
Totally. I mean, I think you're bringing up like a really good question, which is like, what does it even mean to be spiritual? Like, what is spirituality? Like, what does that even mean?
You know what I'm saying? It's useless. I mean, not useless, but like I think it's just a new dimension for me. Like it's like I was on a call today and we were talking about like how it's not like you change. I think a lot of the time the mind has a tendency to release attachment to old paradigm, attach to new paradigm. But that's not really what it is. It's really just you're filling in a gap that didn't exist. The whole thing is one thing. I think the spiritual aspects of everything is really just completing the story, as it were, showing you a bigger picture, a more holistic picture of it. But the whole thing works as one sort of circuit, one sort of thing, and it is all one thing. And the embodiment of that is where I think like all of those things come together, like as you in your life dealing with, you know, understanding that there are material things that you need to worry about in your life. Your body is your body, like that's a part of your existence, but it's not everything, right? And I think a lot of that is really useful to keep in mind in your spiritual journey, because it's real easy to like put it out there and make it this like other thing and I think coming from Christianity, I'm very like aware when that starts happening for folks, because I'm like, okay, it's because it feels it's the same thing. It's like we pull an old religious construct and try to paint it over this new. I was like kind of venting at book club last night. I was just like, it just feels like a lot of spirituality has become this almost new pseudo religion. Like, this is the way to do it. If you don't do it this way, nah. Like, and it's like, what?
Totally. The dogma. I mean, it's so insidious.
Real quick.
I think, yeah, I mean, we do that in everything, right? Like, find the dogma and express it and attach to it. Yeah, and it's interesting because, right, spirituality is kind of becoming like its own religion. Like, everyone's like rejecting the traditional ones and they're like, oh no, I'm just spiritual, but it still gets that the thing of be positive, think positive. Oh, you have to like dress this way. You have to like look a certain way. You have to have crystals on your altar. You have to have a morning routine and an evening routine, and you have to meditate twice a day, and like all of these like rules that are kind of, you know, if someone asks, I feel like this always happens where people will be like, oh, you're like spiritual. Like, do you meditate twice a day? Or like, do you meditate? Like, everyone's always like, oh, do you meditate? Everyone just asks that all the time. And it's just like not your business. It's so personal, right? I mean, not that we can't talk about that or whatever, but I feel like it's this thing of like, oh, if you meditate twice a day, then you're the thing. And if you don't, then you're not the thing. But it's like, yeah, but what's the point of meditation, right? Like, it's to be aware, it's to be conscious, to be observing your thoughts. Like, and it comes for me like late in the last few years, I feel like what I've been exploring a lot is thought, which I think is not something that I was really exploring very specifically before. And I feel like that's been so helpful to just observe like the way that my thoughts go and just be like, oh yeah, like I have, and to kind of like identify them, like, oh, I'm feeling urgency. Like, that's just a thought. I don't have to buy into that. And like all of these thoughts that it's like, sometimes you believe them and you follow them into like wherever they lead you, which is like, oh yeah, like my friend said this to me, and like, God, I don't even want to be her friend anymore. And like, that is so unfair. It's like, you know, just you follow it, you know, because you're believing it. And then there's other thoughts that you don't believe. Like, if you're my friend used the example of like, she was at a gas station and a guy like pulled in front of her or something, did something she didn't like, and she had the thought like, I'm gonna punch that guy. And then she like laughed at herself because obviously she's not gonna punch that guy. That's not a thought that she believed. And I thought that was such a helpful example to just be like, oh yeah, there are thoughts that I just totally don't believe, and then there's other ones that I totally do believe. And all of those thoughts together are sort of like making up like my psychology, which is sort of everything that's not the wisdom from underneath and like the silence. And does that make sense what I'm saying? I feel like I'm
man. I love that sort of kind of when we identify as our thoughts and emotions. I had a funny moment today, man. I was in the middle of my meditation. I'm like doing this crazy meditation as we're talking about it, and I like had this one distracting, like persistent thought. My fucking phone went off in my ears, and I was like, I didn't put it on do not disturb. Oh man, and I'm just like going down the rabbit hole in the middle of a meditation where I literally am like supposed to be like, oh, okay. And it wasn't until like a little bit later I was like, oh yeah, we're lost in the sauce here.
Totally.
And I just kind of noticed that and got back to, you know, what I was doing. But yeah, man, we're going to do a whole fucking thought podcast. That's going to be a lot of fun and talking about that. Cause I'm sure somebody's already like, that's mindfulness. And I'm like, I think that's really for me. I notice I think one of the challenges really with when we try to turn something into conceptualization, the spiritual journey, from that perspective, it creates polarity, right? That's why I believe this is sort of the nature of the first commandment, which is thou shalt not have any other gods before me. God in the Bible points to an idea. Like, it points to I am that I am. It's not this thing, it's a fucking like, it's beyond. I am that I am just pulls your mind apart. And when we conceptualize it and say it's this thing, well, now it's subject to good, bad, right, and wrong polarity, which is a limitation, which if something is God or everything, it can't necessarily be. So I think when we take spiritual concepts or things that we want to use for spirituality or whatever, and we turn them into concepts and we attach to those concepts, one of the challenges is the nature of that polarity. There's always going to be somebody being like, well, here are the opposites of those things. That's the nature of material existence. Which is why my name is Motivational Speaker, because I want to acknowledge that. Like, I literally just wrote this like 11 comment manifesto on my page where I was just like, the opposite of everything I say is true. That's the nature of everything. And truthfully, I'm not a huge fan of people like just buying in. I think there's a temptation to just buy into a belief, whether or not it's your experience, because you're like, this guy seems super spiritual or super cool, and this is just it. I'm just gonna, this is it. And it's like, what, does it work for you? Like, try that shit. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. I mean, you're saying so much. And I think, yeah, like even calling something spiritual then creates not spiritual. And it's like, well, that's not real. That doesn't exist. You know what I mean? And what you're saying too about like buying into things, I think that's something I think so much about is like glamour and kind of how it's like, LA is like a perfect example. Like every spiritual teacher in LA that I found is like so under the radar. Like people that I feel like I'm like, this person is like legit. It's like, that's just like guy, like they don't look the way you think they should look. But then there's like all these other people who are, and not to say that these other people aren't also like great. Like, I don't know. But they're expressing spirituality the way that we like expect it to be or whatever, you know, and they like have their big Instagram following and they're like wearing scarves or like jewelry, crystal jewelry, and like the thing, you know, and they're posting all the right pictures of the meditating and they're doing yoga on the beach and like all of these things. And we can look at that and go, this person must really have the thing that I'm looking for. And I mean, that's not true. That's not true.
You just use that. Like, it's not necessarily true. I mean, is it true for you? Like, does that shit resonate with you? I literally like, yo, take this into your life, try it. How that feel? Is that working for you? Can you, what parts of it don't you fuck with? Drop it. I think there's this, I don't need to get into the esoteric nature of that, but people tend to, well, I tended to kind of swing from massive amounts of openness to massive amounts of attachment just without any sort of questioning. I really gullible as a kid, like constantly, or just like completely structureless, right? One or the other. So when I see people like kind of really attaching to something, it's very evident to me, because it's like, that's an experience that I'm always aware of, that I can sometimes have a tendency to do. And I'm constantly like, just, you know, hoping people like, yo, like, don't wait, like, don't believe me. Don't believe me any of this shit. Cause that's sort of the nature of attachment and belief and so much. Okay. We'll go forever. I want to open it up to the chat. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, something that y'all want to hear us comment on specifically towards the awakening, about the awakening process, I'd love to hear. I think we got 4 on Twitch and some folks on YouTube. So if there are any questions, comments, whatever, we'll take them.
And while we're waiting for those to come in, I just want to comment on what you said, which is, you know, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about mushrooms. And it's like any of these things, whether it's mushrooms or a guru or specific ideology, or it's like all of these things can be tools and they can have something for you, but they're not where your spirituality comes from. And they're not they're not the cause of that. They're not the thing that you need. Like, it all comes from within us, because we are all like coming from the oneness, the thing, God, you know?
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because I totally forgot. We should probably say something uplifting. I totally like, yeah, like let's get clear kind of on our sort of stance on that. Is very much like, it's, I totally agree. Yeah.
And we can totally use things as tools and totally like engage with other people and engage with these ideologies and like try things on and fit them. And some things might work for a little while and then not work later. So it really is just like an alive process in my experience. Okay, cool. I see we have some stuff coming in.
Do you want to take that?
Should I read them? How do I do it?
Yeah. Just read it, because
Okay, so Sonia says, personally, the buying into and the conceptualization of things has been a crucial part in my journey. Once I realized I was doing this, I felt that I was gaining a deeper understanding of everything. So I definitely don't want people to worry about that happening to them, as it can just be part of their journey. Yeah.
Totally agree.
I love the perspective that these are all tools, and tools can be very helpful. Ask a carpenter, like JC. Shout out to JC. But yeah, they're not the source. And yeah, Sonia, thank you for pointing that out. They can totally be like a tool, and they can totally be really helpful. And I think the tricky part just comes when something has worked for us and in the past, and so we become unwilling to detach when it no longer fits. In some ways, it's kind of like a hermit crab or anything with a shell that moves to another shell. It's like that shell is profoundly helpful and great for that part of your life, and maybe it will last the whole life. You know, who's to say? And yeah, I definitely don't think anyone should be afraid of that.
I will say,
even
yeah. Oh, go ahead. No,
go ahead.
No, I was jumping you. No, I'm sorry. I thought you were keep going.
Well, I was gonna say, even if you do hold on to something that doesn't fit for a long time, say you like join a cult and it's like really bad and like whatever, and it can feel really heavy and really serious. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think we can be really hard on ourselves, you know, coming out of something maybe that when we realize like, why did I buy into that for so long? Or why did I, you know, believe that person and follow that other, you know, give over my power to that other thing for so long. But it's really it can all be light, and it can all be playful, and nothing has to be like so serious too. Like even if we make like a quote unquote mistake, you know, even if we would call it a mistake or call it you know, whatever.
Yes, totally agree. That's fucking.
What were you gonna say? Do you remember?
I do. Oh, come on. A couple things. I guess I got so excited about talking to you, like I forgot. Like I don't know. I feel like I've been a little loose. So I do want to clarify some things for folks that. So I feel like when we're talking about conceptualization, or really to offer another concept for thinking about it, inadvertently, is a term called spiritual materialism. There's a really great book called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism that I would recommend to anybody seeing or hearing this in the future. It's by Chogyam Trungpa. That's not how you say his name, but you know, I'm American, I'm stupid. But it's called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. But all of these are varying degrees of spiritual materialism. Truthfully, you know, even using words can be seen as like a limiting concept to some degree. Something that I like to liken this to, the sort of journey into sort of concepts and then kind of dropping them, is the artistic process. As an artist, we kind of come in with this really raw talent. You just have an idea, like this is it. Not thinking, I'm just being, I'm just doing whatever. And over time, you learn skills, tools, things that are useful to help, you know, sort of access that sort of talent, maybe hone that talent a little more. It's not your talent itself, but it can be incredibly useful. And I think on our spiritual journey, you know, you run into gurus and teachers and things and concepts that can be really useful in just maybe refining things, expanding you, giving you different ways of looking at things. But just like in the artists, there's the temptation to make your art about showing off those skills, right? I want to show you just how talented I am as a rapper, right? Look at all the tricks I can do. I changed my flow 85 times and all and this rhymes with this and it's like, right, but where are you? Where did you show up? And your spiritual journey is not unlike that, right? I'm not trying to tell you all of the reasons, right? It's a very like an acting thing. We show and don't tell. A lot of the time when we're stuck in conceptualization, it's like trying to like tell everybody about all the skills you have, right? Be really external and look, I just meditated and got to a blah, blah, blah spot. Look at it, and this skill and this skill. And that at that point usually is where almost everybody in the artistic process goes, do less, do less, do less. It becomes more about being, and it's a very sort of integrative process to where, you know, now you see Robert De Niro having interviews and like, yo, what do you do? Like, what's your process? He's like, I don't do nothing no more. I do less. That's just what I'm not adding in all this other stuff on top of it. But a lot of the time, you know, it's not necessary, right? You can just be there at the end. But a lot of the time, yes, it is very normal, kind of natural to fall into different tools and techniques and things. And look, I'm a huge fan of discipline too. I think discipline is something that's sorely lacking in the spiritual community. Discipline and responsibility. I think those things can be incredibly powerfully useful. But I think they're once again reflections of the nature of beingness, right? I can be disciplined about something because when a thought to be compulsive pops up, I know I don't have to be involved in it, right? An emotion that takes me out of what I've decided to do today, discipline wise, I don't get involved in it and I can stay in and do what I is. I think it's kind of it can be the result, but also something to help hone that as well. But I think, of course, the confusion, it can be really challenging for folks if you make it all about the stuff, right? Oh, I gotta get my meditation. If I don't do it, then I'm not spiritual. If I don't, then I'm not this. And that can create all kinds of shenanigans. So when you're feeling that, that's when I think it can be really useful to remember to drop that, not drop, but like reevaluate, take a look.
Totally. I would love to have a conversation about discipline. That's at some point, that's something that I feel like I've struggled with. And yeah, I would just like love to like suss that all out. And Sonia says, gotta have that balance. Yeah.
Keep it 100. Appreciate that comment, Sonia. Like that's fire. Anything from TikTok?
Come at us.
That's funny. Any questions from TikTok? I'll take some from y'all. Sorry, I'm like, I have to like lean over and go over there.
Now you're juggling.
I'm juggling. Meditation is just another tool. Bars. I got one from same as her friend with the crystals. It was too rigid and they were trying to experience life. Yeah. Oh man.
I wish you guys could have been there with this crystal guy. It was. Can I tell you another?
Wait. Say it again, because I just lost you.
Said one time, this is my favorite. I think I heard crystal guy. That's my favorite story. Wait, am I still here, or am I?
You were kind of cut out there. Say it again, because I missed the crystals. What you just said.
Oh, I just wanted to tell a story about the crystal guy.
Yes, please do.
I feel like my internet is bad.
It might be mine too.
So we were studying abroad, and I guess there was like people in a circle, and there was a camera sitting there, and someone goes, "Whose camera is that?" And he goes, "That's Shelby's camera, but really it's all of ours because we're all of the same being." That's like my favorite story.
Facts. Have you ever read the Tao Te Ching? Have you? I
have not.
I read it at least once a month. It's probably one of my favorite spiritual texts, mainly because I love spiritual texts that are devoid of conceptualization. The second it creates a concept, it literally cuts the legs out from under it. So I'm a huge fan of it. The first verse of it is literally the Tao that can be described is not the enduring and unchanging Tao. The name that can be named is not the enduring and unchanging name. Conceived of as having no name, it is the originator of heaven and earth. Conceived of as having a name, it's the mother of all things. So I am a huge fan of anything that. So it's always kind of building some sort of concept and cutting it down. So I'm a big fan of the Tao Te Ching. 1 second, I have a question on the thing. Somebody says on TikTok, I just got a reading from the cards. It says, I'm in my way. Do we have any tips? That's interesting. Do you have a thought? I have a thought.
You can go first.
Okay. I think, well, first of all, I want to point out, I guess it's something that I feel kind of strongly about is like, you know, any sort of readings that we get are just kind of reflections of ourselves, right? It's kind of about you. So, you know, if it's useful for you, it's useful for you. That being said, I'm in my own way. Seems interestingly sort of vague. I mean, I feel like we're all only in our own way. I think noticing that, I mean, is huge. I think noticing that it's kind of all about you is really, I'd say maybe one of the first steps to anybody's journey, and taking responsibility for that. I think there's a tendency in our lives to be incredibly external and go, you know, it's all about circumstances that I did, you know, my upbringing, my genetics, whatever. I think while there is some sort of validity to that, some sort of truth to that, at the end of the day, it does come down to you sort of beginning to take responsibility for the universe that you're creating. And yeah, and knowing that whatever life you want to create is actually, you know, available to you, regardless of what's happening sort of externally. And that's sort of the nature, I think, of a lot of the spiritual journey for folks is not being sort of involved in the shenanigans, the waves and the external things, but and in addition to that, being able, or rather being skillful at knowing how to create the reality that you want. And we'll get into some of that stuff later, but yeah, I would agree with your reading. I guess it's all about you. Thoughts?
Well, you know, I think I just had some questions, which are, you know, you don't necessarily have to answer, but, you know, in what is that in regards to, like, why did you ask that? And does it ring true to you? I almost want to ask, like, where does it sit in your body, like getting that card, and to go from there, you know, feel like if it creates a feeling inside of your body, whether it's like maybe a tightness or a dropping, a pit in your stomach, or whether it feels open, and kind of to tune into that, the physical sensation of, to find, you know, what it's trying to tell you, and not to get too attached on trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I in my own way, and what am I doing exactly? And I don't know. That's not necessarily what I would always say to anyone who asks that, but that's just what came to me when I got that. So
I love that. The cursed house. I think that's such a challenge for folks. I think we want to look for like all the minutia. I love really simplifying it and being like, oh, like where is that showing up for you? And something I've been really playing with lately is just dropping any sort of heavy resistance and just kind of being very quick to surrender to that. I think there's a temptation to kind of resist an energy that feels like, oh, like this isn't it, or yeah. And for me, it's been really fun to just literally, anytime I'm experiencing that, I'm taking a breath, I'm grounding before I do anything, before I move. That's what I'm doing out of the gate. We have some more questions or thoughts. Sorry.
Yeah, thoughts. Yeah, I feel from C chips, I feel really undisciplined. I feel like I'm experiencing some periods of awakening, and then I fall into unconscious periods of wanting to avoid pain. Totally normal. Right.
Did it today, my
Yeah.
yeah, completely normal. I think it's useful to not beat yourself up about that first off, like out the gate, right? Like I used to fucking just be, because I came from, sports jock, so I was like, undisciplined, trash, you're a bad person. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, and it also brings up the question for me of like, where are we going? What's the end goal? What's the end result here? And to understand that it's like, at least in my experience, it's like a constantly unfolding and constantly deepening process. And I've definitely gone through periods where I'm like reaching, like, oh, I want to get, if I could only be the most possible spiritual, awake that I can be.
Yeah.
But like, then what? You know what I mean? Like, that's not what life seems to be, at least so far in my experience.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, we avoid pain, and and to just be like aware of that, I think is really the thing, right?
God, yeah, just being fucking aware of it is huge. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I definitely like, I'm literally writing a video about it right now, but that I think it can get sometimes really easy to get trapped in that like end goal mentality. Like, when I'm my most spiritual, like, I'll know when I'm just walking around and I'm super blissful, and it's just, then I will have made it, right? And it's kind of to circle back that trap of me like being like, when I don't have to work a day job, then I'm a real actor and I'll be happy. Like, there's that, it's gonna show up constantly, but I think noticing that is huge.
Totally. Eric said, I think this kind of relates to what we were just talking about. Sometimes surrender means giving up trying to understand and becoming comfortable with not knowing. And Eckhart Tolle, truth. And then, or quote, I mean, but also truth. And then Sonia gave us story. Can we read that?
No, if I can read it.
Can you do it? Or you want me to do it?
No. Just here to share my shroom story.
Love it.
She said she did it for the first time recently while I was happy and feeling grounded. Actually did it multiple times in small doses that week, and had this feeling of bliss and acceptance. Fast forward, I have not been taking them recently because I'm trying to sit through the discomfort and not go in and chase that feeling. I have also been able to go back into this state without the shrooms. Gang. Hell yeah. She didn't say that. I did. I do this by just sitting and in the feeling or laying in my backyard. So yes, it's just a tool. Hallelujah. Yeah, I want to. The only reason I ever ended up taking psychedelics in my life was because literally somebody was like, bro, it sounds like you're on mushrooms, like all the time. I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, I had no. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll try it. And then I was like, oh yeah, no, I remember the first time I did kind of experiment with mushrooms or something. And I just remember being very underwhelmed and very frustrated. I was like, wait, this is it? I did this yesterday, man. Come on, bro. I was really like cocky. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sure higher doses. It wasn't like a crazy dose, but I was just like, oh yeah, nah, this makes sense. Which I'm glad though, because I think I would have been I was kind of like, we get beaten into our heads growing up. Drugs are bad. So I was kind of a little, I don't know, but then I was like, oh no, it's really chill. So they're not necessary, folks.
No.
Ooh, this is a cool question. You can take that one?
To Kara?
Yeah.
I'm on a very personal spiritual journey right now, and I've noticed I'm losing people I'm close to. Any tips on coping with this? It's kind of discouraging.
Yeah. That's.
What do you think? I guess my question would be, what do you think is causing that loss or disconnect? Like, where do you think it's coming from? Or is it because you're not as engaged or interested in being close to them, or is it that they're not really understanding where you're at? Eric says Ram Dass talks about his experience meeting Maharaj Ji. Am I saying that right? And having him try LSD. Really interesting story.
Oh, I gotta watch that. I gotta find that. That sounds really good. Having to try LSD. Well, I don't know if that response is coming. I
You
know.
can ask that to us or to yourself.
No,
Yeah,
for
do
me,
you have anything?
I definitely think that was something that I dealt with. I think a lot of people, I get this question a lot in TikToks, lives and stuff. People talking about like, it's a challenge when you kind of come out of the spiritual closet, dealing you a lot of the time, people, friends, and family fall off for various reasons. One, I think maybe encouraging thing to notice. Well, I will say, when you start showing up as yourself, as more of yourself, folks who aren't really but things that didn't resonate truthfully for you will naturally sort of fall away. This is a sort of a very natural process. Like people, habits, things you used to think. I mean, like it's really just a shedding of an egoic delusion a lot of the time. Yeah. So she said, I'm not just being on surface level interactions anymore, but people I'm close to just have an attitude. It's not that deep, right? Like so a lot of folks, it can be very kind of challenging for people when you kind of just see it everywhere. I think you know what I mean? Like, like when you, when it's like, people are like, oh, I hate my job. And I mean, I have people, some friends are just still very much like, well, if I get this job, then I'll be happy. And then I hate this job and this sucks. And then, and I'm like, well, and like, you just kind of have to sit there. And like, I've found, interesting ways to have that conversation and become curious as to their life. And, well, what do you think this and this and this, and not whatever browbeat them. But yeah, I think when you do start showing up as you, and if, a spiritual dimension is part of your experience that is truthful to you, things, yeah, Eric wrote, it's a spiritual pruning. Like stuff that doesn't resonate with you will sort of fall away. I will say this from my personal experience. The people who the people who are supposed to be there are gonna be there. They're gonna show up. Like even if they fall away for a minute, they're gonna be back. I've had people who we like disconnected because I was off on some other shit, and they showed back up. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that seems accurate.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I mean, but for sure, it can be challenging. I think showing up as yourself also makes it, people have to deal with themselves in a different way. And I have people who are just like not even on a spiritual level that like are just, when people are being authentically themselves, if you're not showing up like that, it can make you uncomfortable. You don't want to be around that person because you're really being seen. A lot of the stuff a lot of the moves and stuff that I would try to do, to hide and not be seen and not be vulnerable in life, like is completely shallow and open, and it makes you feel uncomfortable because I'm like, what are you seeing about me that I'm not showing you? And I am an actor. I'm around really talented actors a lot of the time, and they would like constantly be doing this to me because in order to act, it's really a very spiritual experience. It's about beingness. And so a lot of actors are kind of vibrating at that level. And I'd be like doing my like shtick, whatever the fuck, my ego dance. And they'd just be like, I see you. And they wouldn't say it, but they would feel it. And it would just be like, it's really uncomfortable. So, I was like, I don't want to be around these people. And they're so condescending and whatever. But obviously, this was my projections and shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you lose any friends because of your spiritual journey?
Well, I had like when I was going through like kind of the beginning of my spiritual psychology thing, I was talking to one friend like constantly online, like on G-Chat. I just pulled that out of my memory. That was a thing, right? G-Chat?
Yeah, G-Chat. People still use G-Chat, I think.
Okay. I just like had a moment where it was like transformed or transplaced into another time. Yeah, and we just, I mean, I was like talking about all the things that I wanted to talk about, and he was just like, no, and that really, really disconnected us, definitely. And we're not, I mean, that's like also a longer story of why we're not really close anymore. But I also feel like, as you move away from people, in my experiences, I've moved away from people, and then it can feel really heavy and really serious. And then I find myself in a different part, phase of life, and I'm maybe feeling lighter in my mind, and it feels like I could reach out to that person and it would be fine. It's just like, are you able to meet each other at that next moment? So I think people can always kind of come back around if you want to.
Nicole also brought up a really good point in the TikTok, which is like when you do, she's like, it also, I guess the opposite is like when you do try to show up as your authentic self, people will kind of be at ease, and a lot of the time they will sort of gravitate to you. I guess it does kind of depend on where everybody's at, but that is also something that you'll find. You'll start. I think people open up differently as well. I think some folks will not be into that. Some people will just not be comfortable with that, but a lot of people, will appreciate that and be ready to open. And I think I've been able to discover people like you, Sarah, and like a lot of a community and friends and folks who are kind of open to things like that. So I tend to celebrate what I've gained as well, which is so many crazy things.
I think like speaking as like I'm very extroverted, but I'm also very shy. I can be very shy, especially like around new people. And I feel like for me, I don't always lead with like this part of myself, but if other people are open, then that gives me an invitation to be like, okay, I can be, open with them, and I can be myself with them and be comfortable too. So I think I appreciate that authenticity from people, and like that allows me to connect with them. I'm sure if I was somehow able to be just like completely authentic around new people, that might help create even more connections, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
I definitely will sometimes like just have that sort of, it's an old habit of that like warm up phase to people, like a kid hiding behind his parents' leg, like, oh no, maybe. I think that sort of being able to talk to people thing is really fun, because for me, the reason that a lot of the stuff that I do is I'm big on being able to kind of have those conversations at any level. Like if you want to talk about skateboarding, it's the same thing. If you want to talk about, making candles, same shit. Doesn't matter. It's all kind of the same to me. And that's been really fun for my experience, being able to still communicate authentically as myself, but understanding I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm talking about life. It's all one thing and it works one way. So that's really been one of the blessings of my journey, is being able to kind of translate to whatever language anybody's speaking.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing for me has been to kind of assume enlightenment. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, we talked about, sorry. Yes, we talked. Yeah, I totally agree.
Because I think a lot of people, especially when they're going through a spiritual awakening at the beginning, and I've seen this a lot. I mean, I definitely did this when I was at the beginning, and I've seen in spiritual communities that I've been in that people really close off around their own spiritual community and assume ignorance from anyone who's not in that. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, like people are so awake in different ways and so enlightened in different ways, and maybe people use different language than you do or have different experiences, but I think more people are more enlightened than we might initially think when we're first kind of waking up to it.
100%. Yeah.
And if you try to meet them, right, and you just meet them with the truth, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be like, that astral plane was crazy yesterday.
Yes. Yes.
But I think people can meet you, and you'll be able to see like where people are at too.
I think that's a good place to end because I absolutely love that. That is somebody see others as their highest selves. Yeah, I think that's always a great move. If you are on your awakening journey listening to this, please, if there's something to take away from that, I think that's something really great. Just pull that and see everybody kind of as their sort of highest self. I rock with that. Cool, man. This was fun.
So fun. Thank you everyone for joining and for participating and your questions and comments and stuff. It's so fun to have so much like interaction, have big conversations like this with lots of people.
Man, I didn't know what to expect, but everybody showed up and showed out, and this was cool. So yeah, this is the podcast. We did it.
So us and you.
And us. Mostly us. Let's so cool. I don't know if we have a sign off, but I'm David.
I'm Sarah. Sorry, were you gonna say my name?
I was not. And thank y'all so much.
We didn't practice this before, you guys.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you for being with us, y'all. This was a lot of fun. I guess we'll be back next week. You want to do this again? Are you cool with that? Yeah. Let's have some fun. We'll figure it out. We'll let y'all.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Thank you. This was dope. Y'all have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week, y'all. Peace and blessings, love. Know yourselves. Good night, y'all. Now I gotta stop the live. How do I do that? I can't remember. Oh.
We're live for